The name's Spanner. Dick Spanner. Private investigator.
Dick Spanner, P.I., was first unleashed on the unsuspecting British public in May 1987.
What an entrance.
Set in a parallel universe not far from here, the show followed the cases of Dick Spanner, a robotic private detective living in a futuristic and dangerous city known as the Big Pear. Across 22 6-minute episodes, Dick would take a trip to Mexico in search of Harry the Human Cannonball, who had disappeared after he was fired, and then to the glittering lights of Ivywood, where he became embroiled in a battle between the Talls and the Smalls while searching for the Maltese parrot.
What's up, Dick?
Dick's investigations would often be aided by the glamorous Mae East.
When she moved, it was like watching a sack full of bowling balls.
Frustrated by the suspicious Lieutenant O'Grady.
O'Grady called me aside. I called him Lieutenant O'Grady.
And almost thwarted by such dastardly villains as Sydney Sidestreet, mob boss Mendoza, circus owner Signor Oliver, and movie director Eric von Strongbow.
I'd spotted the resemblance. I'd figured they were identical triplets.
Following completion of Terrorhawks, Jerry Anderson had been producing television commercials, but was always open to new ideas from people who had worked with him previously. Terry Adlam, a former Terrorhawks visual effects assistant, was looking to work on these commercials as a storyboard artist, and came to a meeting with Anderson armed with a portfolio of sketches and doodles. Anderson was particularly taken with an image of a robotic private detective, and Adlam pitched the character to him on the spot as a combination of Philip Marlowe and Inspector Clouseau living in a futuristic Blade Runner-style universe.
I told him the whole damn thing from the beginning.
Anderson instantly saw the potential of the character and teamed Adlam with writer Tony Barwick to begin working on scripts. Barwick, who had most recently written 35 of the 39 episodes of Terrorhawks and had been primarily responsible for the show's drastic shift towards comedy, was a perfect partner for the pun-loving Adlam, and his assignment to the new series ensured that it would be the strangest and silliest Anderson production of all time.
I took the elevator up to the 14th floor. My office is on the 15th, but that's another story.
The scripts would be packed with bad jokes and painful puns, supported by whatever visual gags the team had dreamt up in the bar the previous lunchtime.
I settled for a rusty nail.
The result was a series in which the narrative often took second place to the jokes, which ran the gauntlet from amusing wordplay to Looney Tunes-style slapstick, and which was slightly more risque than any previous Anderson production. With the comedic tone of the series now firmly set, the first 6-minute episode was shot in April 1985 at Bray Studios, which had previously served as the base of production for both Terrorhawks and the Space 1999 model department.
Remember that one?
And, appropriately enough, Terrorhawks effects director Steve Begg joined the team to help bring Dick to life.
I told them to hold their heads high.
In another noticeable departure from what had gone before, the series would be produced using stop-motion animation. Although stop-motion had occasionally been used in previous Anderson series, most notably in Terrorhawks, this would be the first of his series to be entirely animated in this way.
I left him to it.
This pilot was then pitched to broadcasters with the aim of getting a commission for a full series, which finally came in the form of a request from Channel 4 for 22 6-minute episodes. The 22 episodes would actually form two 11-part stories, The Case of the Human Cannonball and The Case of the Maltese Parrot. Each installment would end with a cliffhanger that often saw Dick plunging to his doom, frantically searching his pockets for exactly the wrong tool to get him out of this latest jam.
German limbo dancing by Unter der Bar. Jumpantje Joseph. How many times can you be wrong?
Dick Spanner wasn't an especially big-budget production, which prohibited the hiring of a full voice cast. As a result, Dick's narration would have to tell pretty much the whole story, and his voice would be provided by none other than Scott Tracy himself, Shane Rimmer.
It was time to hit the sack. The sharp stab of pain made me realize It was a dumb move.
Rimmer would prove to be a perfect fit for the character, playing Spanner absolutely dead straight in order to heighten the madness going on around him, while also giving the character a bizarre dignity that only made his constant failure even more amusing. Other character voices were provided as needed by members of the production team, with the glamorous Mae East being voiced by none other than Terry Adlam himself. The series would air in the UK as part of Network 7, Channel 4's new Sunday lunchtime magazine programme for young adults, with each episode usually appearing at about 1:20 PM.
The press was onto it like a shot.
Can't wait! This is a scoop!
The show was well received by both the channel and viewers alike, with its outrageous puns and deeply surreal visuals proving particularly popular with those still recovering from the night before. While Dick was pounding the streets of the Big Pear, Anderson had been producing a series of commercials for Tennent's Pilsner, starring a very similar robotic private eye.
Lou Tennant's the name.
Lou Tennant, voiced by Vivian Stanshall, also lived in a surreal stop-motion universe and had a girlfriend who bore a strong resemblance to Mae East.
I asked the barman for a Tennant's Pilsner. The cool taste was music inside me.
These ads usually ended with Lou being forced to choose between his Tennent's Pilsner or some measure of fame and fortune, and always selecting the latter.
Tennant's Pilsner. It's good, but not that good.
Although Dick Spanner would not return for Network 7's second series, the show was so popular that Channel 4 would schedule separate late-night and evening repeats of both adventures that recut each 11-part story into two 25-minute installments.
Well, when one door shuts, another door closes.
These would be the last chance to catch Dick on British television, although a brief clip from the series would later appear in an episode of Anderson's late 90s stop-motion fantasy series, Lavender Castle.
Ripper! I haven't seen this for years!
In 2007, Dick Spanner was finally released on DVD, but much to the dismay of many fans, the episodes were cropped into widescreen and given an entirely new musical score and new end credits.
Another dumb move.
It would be another 10 years before the complete, uncut Dick arrived on DVD. This time featuring all 22 episodes in their original format, plus the Channel 4 compilation versions.
Telegram for Mr. Spanner!
Even more exciting was the inclusion of several new adventures for Spanner, one of which was a recently rediscovered first installment of an abandoned third Dick Spanner story from 1987, this time with Terrorhawks actor Jeremy Hitchin providing the title character's voice.
The cold was getting to me. It was freezing my nuts off.
However, Shane Rimmer would also be back to voice Dick for a new two-part animatic, The Case of the Screaming Dane, written, drawn and directed by Adlam.
Damn and beavers! I'd lost them, but all the signs seemed to indicate they were heading for the docks.
This was to be Shane's final association with the character before he passed away in May 2019, leaving behind a legacy of television and film work that included many memorable contributions to the Gerry Anderson universe.
Dick Spanner, what a hoot! He was probably the most lovable character I was ever associated with.
Despite being one of the most unusual and outlandish Gerry Anderson shows, Dick Spanner is also one of the funniest and most creative he ever produced.
They just don't write stuff that good today.
Although largely a parody of the classic detective genre and the golden age of Hollywood, the series operated on the irresistible principle that no joke was too broad, too irrelevant, or too painful.
I was right. It was custody.
And as a result, appealed to both adults and children alike, providing you cover their eyes during the naughty bits. Each story builds to a conclusion that has to be seen to be believed, and at the centre of all this madness is Shane Rimmer's reliably deadpan Spanner, struggling to keep his cool in a world where nothing makes sense.
This is over the top. Way over the top.
Even though some of the jokes really should come with health warnings, Dick Spanner is a series that's very difficult to dislike. and can only really be summed up in one word.
Bizarre.
Who is it keeps saying that?